right from the very beginning, I was lucky. I was born in the mid-60s in Canada into a loving family, into a prosperous nation, in a time of optimism and newfound freedom for many. My mother and father wanted me and welcomed me. They named me Lesley Joy, and my mom told me more than once that I was well named, for I had brought so much joy into their lives. So I lived a life of enormous privilege, mostly because of how held and loved I felt, until I was 11 years old. Then, one hot Sunday afternoon in July, my 42-year-old father suddenly dropped dead of a heart attack. My mother was plunged into grief. Our family and friends showed up for us with casseroles, with words of sympathy, of shock, of compassion. But my mother didn't know, and the culture I was born into didn't know, how to support us to grieve, how to let go, how to face it. At the moment my mother told my little brother and I that our dad had died, she was already slurry and blurry from the Valium a well-intentioned doctor had administered to her in the emergency room. And she held in one hand what was to become a ubiquitous glass of Ryan water. It felt like a door had opened somewhere and my father had stepped through it and disappeared. And even though my mother was still physically present, she was gone too. Maybe she was out there looking for him somewhere. She was lost to me in her grief and her growing addiction. Into this vulnerable territory entered a man who saw the needy child that I was, the longing for love, for holding, for seeing, and he offered me all that I needed. But it came in the form of a sexually abusive relationship. I'd like to believe this wouldn't happen today, that we are so much more willing to see and to confront sexual abuse, that perpetrators can no longer hide behind our fear, our denial, behind their privilege, behind their roles of authority, behind their fame. But studies tell us that 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys will experience sexual abuse in their childhood with a member of their family or with a trusted person in a role of authority who is close to the family. Those statistics are shocking. If the statistics are true, many of us will have experienced sexual abuse or loved someone who has. Sexual abuse happens, and it happens in loving families. So if you are one of those many, and me speaking about this out loud, me not being silent about it anymore, is stirring feelings in you, and you might see my knees are shaking. You might have feelings of rage, of terror, of shame. Maybe an icy numbness has come over you. And if that's happening for you, I hope you can feel me reaching out to you right now in tenderness and in solidarity. And I want you to know that I am here as living proof that that voice inside you that tells you you will never get over it might not be true. We might get over it. I am living a journey from being a victim to being a survivor to being a thriver. And it is a continuous journey, and I may never reach the final destination, but I am on the road. Victim, survivor, thriver. And it is my belief that we all have the potential to make that journey, that we are profoundly interconnected with each other, and that any individual who undertakes a healing journey does so on behalf of all the others, on behalf of the whole. So we do it together. You don't have to do it by yourself. So what were the tools? What were the conditions that made it possible for me to make this journey? It's going to be different for each one of us, and part of the art is to assembling our toolkit. In my case, part of it was living in intentional community. Another part was a meditation practice in which I learned to sit and to pay attention to all that was arising within me and apply loving compassion to it. Friendship was really important, and also a relationship with nature. It was much easier for me to see beauty and perfection in the natural world I experienced around me than it was to see it in myself. I also found my vocation as a clown. So I'm one who knows the art of bringing joy and laughter into really difficult situations. The art of playfully naming the unnameable. I also did hundreds and hundreds of hours of therapy, of course. My therapist is here in the room today, yes. Still on the road. Many ceremonies, many rituals, all of these tools have contributed to the journey that I've made. And of course, there came a point where I needed to get back into that dangerous territory of sexual relationship. I met a beautiful man who had lived his own story with death and addiction and was in recovery. Now, this was a revelation to me. I had never met anyone who was in recovery before. I didn't even know that was an option. But through living with him and with the evidence of recovery, I came to have much more hope for myself and also for the world I lived in. So we married, we had a son together, and 25 years after my father had suddenly died, I once again considered myself to be one of the lucky ones. Extremely well-resourced. So much joy, so much resilience, so much gratitude just to be alive. By this point, my husband and I had separated, and our friends had supported us to grieve the ending of our marriage, to let go of marriage being the best vessel for our love to be in. We had learned how to be co-parents, and we were once again dear friends. Then, one night, icy, cold night in mid-December, I found myself standing outside the big building that my husband had a small flat in. There was a light on in his flat. His car was in the parking lot, but he wouldn't answer the phone or come to the door when we were ringing the bell. With me in the parking lot were 2 police officers and 2 of the people who were closest to my husband, and everybody was inventing excuses for why he wasn't answering the door. Someone said, maybe he's in the bathtub with headphones on, listening to really loud music, and so on, stories. I felt really afraid. I had a sense something terrible had happened, and I tried to convince the police officers that we needed to break into the building. They were reluctant to do so. So I took myself off for a walk in the garden. Everything was frozen. In the starlight, it felt like all the rushing forward of life was temporarily suspended. And in that beautiful garden, I found the courage to admit to myself I knew why he wasn't coming to the door, that the only explanation that made any sense was that he must have suddenly died. And with that realization, I felt a wall of terror coming towards me like a tsunami wave. This was the worst thing I could possibly imagine could happen to me or to my son. I couldn't believe I was going to have to live this whole story again, and this time in the mother role. I would have done anything I could to avoid it. But then I heard a voice. It was my own voice talking to me. And it was so kind and firm and almost joyful. And the voice said to me, "Say yes. Just say yes." It might seem like the worst thing ever, but just say yes. And in that moment of saying yes, I surrendered. I surrendered to life, not how I wish it was, but how it is. So this was not the yes of a heroic warrior putting on the armor to ride into battle and crush the foe. It was not the yes of an unsupported victim unable to say no. It was the yes of surrender. It was the yes of opening my arms wide to include the unincludable. So I wouldn't have chosen it. I would have done anything I could to get around what was happening. And yet, it was clear there were no other options. It is. So if it is, how can I be in it and live it fully? How can I bring everything I've got, everything I've been given to it? How can I make sure it's going to be different this time? It's going to be better. How do I not just survive it, but live and grow and develop through it? How might it even possibly heal me? How do I need to be so that a future me could look back on this present me and be proud? How might it inform me, heal me, so that I could bring that healing to others? In that moment, it was clear to me everything terrible that had happened to my life, in my life so far, had all thoroughly prepared me to be the woman living this moment. Who better than me to teach my young son how to grieve, how to let go, how to find joy and beauty and connectedness even in the worst thing ever? And if I was going to teach him, I was clearly going to have to live it. I would have to be a role model. I would have to, in Gandhi's words, be the change I wish to see in the world. It felt like a huge ask, but I was tired of surviving. I didn't want to just be a survivor anymore. I wanted to thrive. So if it's true that we are all just walking each other home in this life, it occurred to me that maybe my willingness to hang out in this territory was the greatest gift I had to give to my son and to the world. And there is much in this world I would love to say no to. Much that I passionately wish was not so. But if I say yes, so many more options present themselves for me. And it has become my practice to try to say yes as much as I can, to try to include all of it. So I am aware that we are poisoning our oceans. Yes. Bullied gay teenagers are committing suicide. Yes. A devastating earthquake in Nepal. Yes. Hundreds of Nigerian girls kidnapped, and the press isn't interested in that anymore. Climate chaos, greed, inequality. Yes, 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 and yes. As I say yes to all of it, all the ways to engage arise in me. How do I feel about this? When do I want to use my voice to protest? Is a playful approach and response appropriate right now, or is this a time to be fierce? I have so many more options when I say yes than when I'm locked in my internal endless monologue of no. No, I don't want this to be. No, this isn't how it should be. No, it's not fair. No, no, no. And there came a time in my journey when I realized that it was possible to not only say yes in the present moment, but to say yes backwards. To say yes to events that had occurred in the past that I had been unable to say yes to at the time, or in some cases had been unable to say no to. The hardest area to apply this learning has been around my experience of sexual abuse. My sexual abuse should not have happened. It was a dangerous misuse of power. And it took me years to really understand and believe that it wasn't my fault, that I was not guilty. It should not happen to anyone. And yet, there came a time when I started to ask myself, at first very quietly, since it did happen, how has it been useful to me? What if it wasn't given to me to torture me and squash me and limit me? What if it was given to me to help me become the person I am becoming, to deepen my compassion, to make it absolutely clear to me that I am part of everyone that lives, that we are one family, that the suffering that is inflicted on any sentient being is suffering that we all feel. I am part of all that lives, that all that has lived, and all that will live. We are one family going backward and forward in time. I belong here. I am at home here. So now I want you to imagine someone or something that you love dearly that you would willingly say yes to if it was in trouble. Some specific someone or something, and call them to mind. And we're going to rehearse together saying yes. So I'm going to count to 3. You think about that person or thing, and we're going to say yes together out loud. You ready? Yeah? Oh, no, don't make me. Yeah, are you ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yes! Awesome. Okay, so you're so good at that, I've got one more thing for you before I'm done. It's a little bit trickier. Some of you will intuitively know where I'm heading and will hate me for it, and that is fine with me. I want you to imagine someone or something that is really hard to say yes to. Something you would like to annihilate or get rid of, or never have to face again. Could be personal, it could be planetary, someone or something specific. And now we are going to rehearse together saying yes. If it feels impossible to you to say yes to what you have chosen, I would invite you to imagine a future you that could say yes. And we're going to rehearse together. Nobody has to do this on their own. We are not alone. We've got each other. So sometime in the future, it might come in handy. It's good to rehearse it. I'm going to count to 3. Think of that person or thing that's so hard to say yes to and just give it a try. See if you can open up to include it, to grapple with it, to be with it. 1, 2, 3. Yes. And again. Yes. Last time. Yes. Thank you.